adjusted his expensive watch as he stepped out of his black Mercedes. The gleaming towers of downtown Seattle stretched above him, each one representing another piece of his billion-dollar empire. At 38, he had everything money could buy: penthouse apartments, private jets, and enough wealth to last 10 lifetimes. Yet something felt missing as he walked through the busy streets. The autumn wind carried the scent of roasted coffee and fallen leaves. Had grown up in these same streets, but back then he wore torn sneakers and carried his books in plastic bags. Now his Italian leather shoes clicked against the sidewalk as he made his way to the small where this incredible story began. Sarah's corner sat wedged between two towering office buildings like a tiny flower growing through concrete. The painted wooden sign hung crooked, and the windows needed cleaning, but something about the place drew him in. Maybe it was the warm, golden light spilling onto the sidewalk, or the sound of gentle laughter from inside. He pushed open the glass door, causing a small bell to chime. The smelled like cinnamon and fresh bread. Mismatched chairs surrounded wooden tables with years of use. Local artwork covered the walls, and soft jazz music played from hidden speakers. It felt like stepping into someone's living room. "Welcome to Sarah's Corner," called a cheerful voice from behind the counter. Looked up to see a woman in her 50s with graying hair pulled back in a ponytail. Her apron was dusted with flour, and her smile reached her eyes. She had the kind of face that made strangers feel like old friends. "What can I get you today?" she asked, wiping her hands on a dish towel. "Just coffee black," replied, pulling out his platinum credit card. "Oh, honey, we're cash only here. There's an ATM around the corner if you need it." Felt his cheeks warm with embarrassment. When was the last time he had carried actual cash? He patted his pockets and found only his phone and wallet full of cards that couldn't help him now. "I'll be right back," he said, turning toward the door. "Wait," the woman's voice stopped him. "It's on the house today. You look like you could use some kindness." Stared at her in surprise. Nobody gave him free anything anymore. Everyone wanted something from him: investments, donations, partnerships. But this stranger was offering genuine hospitality with no strings attached. "That's very generous, but I couldn't." "Nonsense, I'm Sarah, and this is my place. When someone walks through that door, they're family." She poured steaming coffee into a ceramic mug decorated with hand-painted sunflowers. "Find yourself a seat anywhere you like." Chose a table near the window and watched the city rush past outside. Hurried along the sidewalk, their faces buried in phones. Everyone seemed to be running towards something or away from something else. He used to be one of them, climbing the corporate ladder with single-minded determination. The coffee was perfect, rich, and smooth without any bitterness. He found himself relaxing for the first time in months. No board meetings to attend, no deals to close, no employees demanding his attention. Just a quiet moment in a warm. "Mind if I sit?" Sarah appeared beside his table carrying her own mug. "Afternoon rush doesn't start for another hour." "Of course," gestured to the empty chair across from him. "Thank you for the coffee. I'm nice to meet you. You don't look like our usual crowd. Most of our customers are artists, students, people from the neighborhood. You've got that expensive suit and tired executive look." Laughed despite himself. "Is it that obvious?" "Honey, I've been reading people for 30 years. You're successful, probably very successful, but you're not happy. Am I wrong?" The question caught him off guard. When was the last time someone had asked him about happiness instead of profit margins? "I suppose I haven't thought about it much lately." "That's the problem right there." Sarah took a sip of her coffee and studied him with kind eyes. "Success without joy is just expensive misery." Before could respond, the door chimed again. A small girl entered, moving slowly and looking around uncertainly. She appeared to be about 7 years old, with dark hair falling in gentle waves past her shoulders. Her clothes were clean but clearly second-hand, a purple sweater with a small hole near the hem and jeans that had been hemmed by hand. "Emma," Sarah's face lit up as she stood. "Right on time, sweetheart." The little girl smiled and hurried over to Sarah, who wrapped her in a warm hug. Noticed the way Emma's thin shoulders relaxed in that embrace, as if she'd been carrying invisible weight. "How was school today?" Sarah asked, leading Emma to the counter. "It was okay. We learned about butterflies. Did you know they taste with their feet?" Emma's voice was soft but full of wonder. "I did not know that. You learn something new every day. Are you hungry? I saved you some of those chocolate chip cookies you love." Emma nodded eagerly, and Sarah disappeared into the kitchen. The little girl remained by the counter, swinging her legs from the tall stool. Her eyes wandered around and eventually landed on. He offered a small wave, and she waved back shyly. Something about her reminded him of his own childhood, the careful way she held herself, the grateful acceptance of kindness from others. He recognized the signs of a child who had learned not to expect too much from the world. Sarah returned with a plate of warm cookies and a glass of milk. Emma accepted them with a whispered, "Thank you," that spoke of good manners learned through necessity rather than privilege. "Emma comes by every day after school," Sarah explained, returning to his table. "Her father works 2 jobs to keep them afloat since her mother passed away last year. Poor little thing spends too much time alone." Felt his chest tighten. What happened to her mother? Cancer, long battle, expensive fight. David, that's her father. He's a good man doing his best, but medical bills don't care about good intentions. Emma's been through more than any child should. As if sensing their conversation, Emma looked over at their table. Her dark eyes held a sadness that seemed too deep for someone so young, but also a resilience that found remarkable. "She's a special little girl," Sarah continued. "Smart as a whip, kind as can be, and braver than most adults I know, but she misses her mother terribly." Watched Emma carefully break her cookie into small pieces, making it last longer. The simple gesture broke his heart. How many meals had he thrown away without thinking? How much food went to waste in his corporate cafeteria while children like Emma treasured every bite? The afternoon light shifted, casting long shadows across the floor. More customers began to trickle in, college students with laptops, neighbors stopping by for their daily coffee, an elderly man who seemed to know everyone by name. The transformed into a community hub, with Sarah at the center of it all. Found himself staying longer than planned, drawn into the warmth and genuine human connection that filled the space. He watched Sarah greet each customer by name, remember their usual orders, ask about their families and dreams. This wasn't just a business to her, it was a calling. Emma finished her cookies and helped Sarah wipe down tables, her small hands working diligently. She moved with the efficiency of someone accustomed to being helpful, someone who understood that kindness should be repaid with kindness. "Thank you for the snack, Miss Sarah," Emma said as she prepared to leave. "Daddy will pick me up at Mrs. in an hour." "You're welcome, sweetheart. See you tomorrow." "Yes, ma'am." Emma hugged Sarah goodbye, then surprised by walking over to his table. She stood there for a moment, gathering courage for something. "Excuse me, sir." Her voice was barely above a whisper. "Yes," set down his coffee cup and gave her his full attention. Emma took a deep breath, her small hands clasped in front of her. "I don't want to bother you, but I heard Miss Sarah say you're very successful. Does that mean you're rich?" The question was asked with such innocent directness that couldn't help but smile. "I suppose I am. Why do you ask?" Emma glanced toward Sarah, who was helping other customers and not paying attention to their conversation. The little girl seemed to be wrestling with something important, her brow furrowed in concentration. "My school is having a Mother's Day celebration next week," she said finally. "All the kids are supposed to bring their moms for lunch and activities, but I don't have a mom anymore." Felt his heart skip a beat. He could see where this was heading, and it both terrified and moved him beyond words. Emma continued, her voice growing stronger with determination. "Miss Sarah is really nice, and she takes care of me after school, but she's not my mom. The teacher says I can bring my dad, but he has to work that day. He can't afford to take time off." She paused, looking down at her worn sneakers before meeting his eyes again. The courage it must have taken for her to approach a stranger made his chest tight with emotion. "I was thinking," Emma said, her words coming faster now as if she was afraid she might lose her nerve. "If you're rich, maybe you have a nice wife who could pretend to be my mom for just one day. I promise I'd be really good and I wouldn't ask for anything else ever." The request hit like a physical blow. Here was this brave little girl who had lost everything that mattered most, asking not for money or toys or anything material. She just wanted someone to sit with her at a school lunch so she wouldn't feel different from the other children. Opened his mouth to speak, but no words came out. How could he explain that he had no wife, no family of his own? That despite all his wealth and success, he was as alone as she was, just in a different way? Emma misread his silence as rejection. Her small shoulders sagged and she took a step backward. I'm sorry for bothering you. I know it's a weird thing to ask. Miss Sarah always says there's no harm in asking, but maybe I shouldn't have. Wait, found his voice at last. You didn't bother me at all, it's just, I don't have a wife, Emma. The disappointment on her face was almost unbearable to witness. She nodded slowly, as if this was just another in a long line of disappointments she'd learned to accept. That's okay, she said with forced brightness. Thank you for listening anyway. She turned to leave and felt something shift inside his chest. This moment felt like a crossroads, though he couldn't quite understand why. Here was this incredible little girl who had shown more courage in 5 minutes than most adults displayed in a lifetime. She wasn't asking for charity or pity. She was asking for connection, for someone to care enough to show up for her. Emma, wait! The words left his mouth before he'd fully formed the thought. She turned back, hope flickering in her dark eyes. Took a deep breath, knowing that whatever he said next would change both their lives forever. I don't have a wife, but what if I came instead? Would that help? Emma's eyes widened in surprise. You would do that, but you don't even know me. I'd like to know you, said, and realized he meant it completely. If your dad says it's okay, and if you want me there, I'd be honored to attend your Mother's Day celebration. For a moment, Emma just stared at him in disbelief. Then her face broke into the smile had ever seen. It was like watching the sun come out from behind storm clouds. Really, you really mean it? I really mean it. Emma bounced on her toes with excitement, then seemed to remember something and grew serious again. But what if the other kids ask questions? They might think it's weird that I brought a stranger instead of my mom or dad. Considered this, what would you like me to tell them? Could you say you're my... Emma paused, thinking carefully. Could you say you're my special friend, someone who cares about me? I think that would be perfect, because it would be true. Emma's smile returned, even brighter than before. This is the best thing that's happened to me in a really long time. Wait until I tell Daddy. As Emma skipped toward the door with newfound lightness in her step, realized that this small interaction had awakened something in him that had been dormant for years. For the first time in longer than he could remember, he felt genuinely needed not for his money or his business connections, but for his simple human presence. Sarah appeared at his table, having witnessed the entire exchange. Her eyes were bright with unshed tears. That was a beautiful thing you just did, she said softly. Shook his head. I think she's the one doing something beautiful for me. As Emma disappeared around the corner, her happy voice could be heard telling everyone she passed, spent the entire drive back to his penthouse thinking about Emma's request. The city lights blurred past his window as his driver navigated through traffic, but all he could see was that little girl's hopeful face. When was the last time someone had looked at him like that? Not because they wanted something from his bank account, but because they simply wanted him to be present. His phone buzzed constantly with work calls and messages, but for once he ignored them all. There were more important things to consider now, like how exactly does a billionaire businessman pretend to be a mother figure for a 7-year-old girl he'd just met? The next morning did something he'd never done before in his 15-year career. He cleared his entire schedule for the week. His assistant, Jennifer, stared at him in disbelief when he made the announcement. Sir, you have the merger meeting on Tuesday, the board presentation on Wednesday, and the charity gala on Thursday. These are commitments we made months ago. Reschedule them all, said calmly. Something more important has come up. More important than the deal. That's worth $200 million. Looked up from his computer screen. Jennifer, have you ever done something that felt more valuable than money? She blinked in confusion. What do you mean? Never mind, just clear the schedule. And Jennifer, call the best children's store in the city. I need to learn about 7-year-old girls. That afternoon, found himself in a place he'd never imagined stepping foot Rainbow's End Children's Boutique. The store was a wonderland of bright colors, stuffed animals, and tiny clothes that seemed impossibly small. He felt completely out of his element among the cheerful displays and children's music playing softly in the background. Can I help you find something? Asked a young woman with purple streaks in her hair and paint under her fingernails. Her name tag read Jessica. I need to understand what 7-year-old girls like, said, feeling foolish but determined. I'm attending a school event with a very special little girl, and I want to make sure I don't embarrass her. Jessica's expression softened. That's really sweet. Are you her dad? No, I'm... Paused. How could he explain this unique situation? I'm her friend, she doesn't have a mother, and she asked me to attend a Mother's Day celebration with her. Oh wow, Jessica said, her eyes growing warm. That's incredible, she must really trust you. What's she like? Found himself describing Emma in detail, her quiet strength, her careful way of making cookies last longer, her brave question in the... As he talked, he realized how much the little girl had already impacted him in just one day. She sounds amazing, Jessica said when he finished. Let me show you some things that might help. For the next 2 hours, Jessica patiently explained the world of 7-year-old girls. Learned about favorite colors. Emma had mentioned purple, popular books. She loved stories about brave animals. And the kinds of small gifts that meant the most, handwritten notes, friendship bracelets, anything that showed someone was thinking of them. The most important thing, Jessica emphasized as they walked through the store, is that you listen to her. Kids that age are incredibly observant. They know when adults are really paying attention versus just going through the motions. Bought a purple notebook with a unicorn on the cover, thinking Emma might like to write or draw in it. Jessica also helped him pick out a simple friendship bracelet kit, suggesting that making something together might be a good activity if there was extra time during the school event. On Tuesday morning, returned to Sarah's corner. He'd been thinking about Emma constantly and wanted to learn more about her life before the school's celebration. The bell chimed as he entered, and Sarah looked up with a surprised smile. Well, look who's back. Emma will be so excited to see you. She hasn't stopped talking about Friday since yesterday. Ordered his coffee and settled at the same table by the window. Sarah, can you tell me more about Emma's father? I want to make sure I'm not overstepping any boundaries. Sarah poured herself a cup of tea and joined him. David Martinez is one of the hardest-working men I know. He lost his wife to breast cancer about 14 months ago. The medical bills nearly destroyed them financially, even with insurance. Now he works construction during the day and stocks shelves at a grocery store 3 nights a week. She paused, stirring her tea thoughtfully. David's a proud man. He doesn't like accepting charity, but he knows Emma needs more than he can provide on his own. That's why he lets her come here after school instead of paying for expensive. What's he like as a father? Devoted, patient. Emma adores him and he'd do anything for her. But he feels guilty that he can't give her the life would have wanted. He worries that Emma is growing up too fast, taking care of herself too much. Nodded slowly. Do you think he'll be okay with me attending the school event? I think David will be grateful that someone wants to show up for his daughter. He's been dreading that Mother's Day celebration for weeks, knowing Emma would be the only child there without a mother figure. At 3:30, the door chimed and Emma bounded inside, her backpack bouncing behind her. Her face lit up when she saw at his usual table. You came back, she exclaimed, hurrying over to him. I was worried maybe you changed your mind. I promised I'd be there, didn't I? Smiled. I always keep my promises. Emma beamed and dropped her backpack beside his chair. Can I sit with you while I have my snack? Of course. As Emma munched on Sarah's homemade cookies, she chattered about her day at school. Found himself genuinely interested in her stories about math class. She was good with numbers. Art time, she'd painted a picture of a butterfly. And recess, she usually read instead of playing because she didn't have many friends. Why don't you play with the other kids? Asked gently. Emma shrugged, a gesture that seemed too mature for her age. They talk about things I don't understand, like where they went on vacation or what new toys their parents bought them. I don't want to make them feel bad by saying I can't do those things. Felt his heart break a little more. This wise little girl was already learning to make herself smaller to avoid making others uncomfortable. You know what I think, he said. I think the other kids would be lucky to have a friend like you. You're kind and smart and funny. Those are much better qualities than having expensive toys. Emma considered this seriously. Miss Sarah says the same thing, but it's hard sometimes being different. I understand that feeling, said quietly. I was different when I was your age too. Really, how? Found himself sharing stories he hadn't thought about in years. Growing up in a single-parent household, wearing the same clothes to school day after day, pretending he wasn't hungry when other kids talked about their family dinners. Emma listened with rapt attention, her eyes wide with understanding. But you're rich now, she pointed out. So being different worked out okay for you. The money helps, admitted. But the most important thing I learned was that being different isn't something to hide. It's something that makes you special. They were interrupted by the door opening. A tall, lean man with calloused hands and tired eyes entered, his work clothes dusty from a day at the construction site. Emma immediately perked up. "Daddy." David Martinez smiled at the sight of his daughter and could see the love between them in that simple exchange. David approached their table cautiously, clearly curious about the well-dressed stranger sitting with Emma. "Daddy, this is," Emma announced proudly. "He's the special friend I told you about. He's going to come to the Mother's Day thing at school on Friday." David extended a work-roughened hand to who shook it firmly. "David Martinez, Emma's told me a lot about you. I have to admit, I was skeptical when she first mentioned this, but—" "But what?" asked. "But I haven't seen her this excited about anything in months. If you're willing to take time out of your schedule to make my daughter happy, then I'm grateful." The two men studied each other carefully, saw wariness in David's eyes, but also desperate hope. Here was a father who would do anything for his child, including trust a stranger if it meant Emma could feel normal for one day. "Can I ask why you're doing this?" David continued. "Most people in your position wouldn't give kids like Emma a second thought." Glanced at Emma, who was watching their conversation with intelligent eyes. How could he explain that her simple question had cracked open something inside him that he'd kept locked away for years? "Your daughter has incredible courage," said finally. "It takes guts to ask for what you need, especially from a stranger. I admire that, and honestly, I think she's doing me a bigger favor than I'm doing her." David's expression softened slightly. "She is pretty special. Her mother always said Emma had an old soul." "Tell me about," said impulsively. David's face transformed when he spoke about his late wife. Had been a teacher, he explained. She loved reading, gardening, and making elaborate Halloween costumes for Emma each year. She taught Emma to be kind to everyone, to always say please and thank you, and to find something beautiful in every day. "She would have loved this Mother's Day celebration," David said wistfully. "Was always volunteering at school events, organizing classroom parties. Emma misses that more than anything, having someone who showed up for all the little moments." As they prepared to leave, Emma hugged goodbye. "I can't wait for Friday. I already told my teacher you're coming. She said it sounds very special." "It is special," agreed. "I'll see you Friday morning, okay?" That evening, sat in his penthouse overlooking the city and thought about the events of the past few days. His life had been completely predictable before meeting Emma. Work, meetings, business dinners, repeat. He'd built an empire but somehow forgotten to build a life. Now he found himself researching elementary schools online, trying to understand what a Mother's Day celebration might involve. He called his assistant and asked her to research Emma's school, Riverside Elementary. He wanted to understand the community Emma was part of. Jennifer's report was eye-opening. Riverside Elementary served a diverse population, with many families struggling financially. The school relied heavily on volunteers and donations to provide basic supplies. The Mother's Day celebration was traditionally a potluck lunch followed by classroom activities where mothers and children worked together on art projects. Made a mental note to ask Sarah what Emma's favorite foods were, planning to contribute something special to the potluck. He also researched age-appropriate conversation topics and activities, determined to be the kind of companion Emma deserved. Wednesday evening, returned to the specifically to see Emma again. She was delighted by his consistency, already saving him a seat at what she now called their table. "I've been thinking about Friday," she said seriously as she worked on homework at the small table. "What should I call you when I introduce you to my classmates?" "What would you like to call me?" Emma tapped her pencil against her lips, thinking hard. "I don't want to lie and say you're my mom because that wouldn't be true, but I also don't want to say you're just some random person because you're not. What feels right to you? Could I say you're my special grown-up friend, someone who cares about me and wanted to come to my school?" "That sounds perfect, because that's exactly what I am." Emma grinned and returned to her math homework. Found himself helping her with word problems, surprised by how much he enjoyed the simple interaction. When was the last time he'd used his math skills for something that actually mattered to another person? As they worked together, other customers in the began to take notice. overheard whispered conversations about the businessman who comes in to help the little girl. Sarah later told him that the neighborhood was buzzing with curiosity and approval about his friendship with Emma. "You've become something of a local celebrity," Sarah teased as she refilled his coffee. "Mrs. from next door says you've put a spring in Emma's step that hasn't been there since her mother died." Thursday evening made one final visit to the before the big day. Emma was practically vibrating with excitement, having packed and repacked her school bag 3 times to make sure she had everything ready. "I made you something," she announced shyly, pulling a folded piece of paper from her backpack. Unfolded it to find a hand-drawn picture of the two of them sitting at their table. Emma had drawn herself with a huge smile and him with a kind expression. At the bottom, in careful 7-year-old handwriting, she'd written, "My special friend, thank you for caring about me." Felt his throat tighten with emotion. When was the last time anyone had made him something with their own hands? When had anyone thanked him for caring rather than for buying or investing or donating? "This is beautiful, Emma. I'm going to frame it and put it in my office." "Really? In your important business office?" "It's going right on my desk where I can see it every day." Emma beamed with pride. "I can't wait for tomorrow. I've been telling everyone about you. My teacher, Mrs., says she's excited to meet you." As walked back to his car that evening, he realized that tomorrow wasn't just about attending a school event with a lonely little girl. It was about showing up for someone who mattered, being present for moments that couldn't be bought or scheduled or delegated. For the first time in his adult life, was about to experience the simple joy of being needed not for what he could provide, but for who he could choose to be. Tomorrow, he wouldn't be a billionaire or a CEO or a business mogul. He would simply be Emma's special friend, and somehow, that felt like the Friday morning arrived with brilliant sunshine and his first case of genuine nervousness in years. He'd presented to Fortune 500 executives, negotiated billion-dollar deals, and spoken at international conferences without breaking a sweat. But the thought of disappointing one 7-year-old girl had him changing his tie 3 times. He'd arranged to pick Emma up at Sarah's at 10 o'clock. The Mother's Day celebration began at 11, giving them time to walk to the school together. Arrived early, carrying the purple notebook he'd bought and a small gift bag with the friendship bracelet kit. Sarah was waiting with Emma, who looked absolutely radiant in her best dress, a navy blue outfit with small white flowers that David had clearly ironed with extra care. Her dark hair was pulled back with a matching headband, and her shoes were polished to a shine. "You look beautiful, Emma," said and meant it completely. "Thank you, Daddy helped me get ready. He said I should represent our family well today." She paused, then added softly, "He said Mama would be proud." Felt his chest tighten. She absolutely would be. Emma practically bounced as they walked the 6 blocks to Riverside Elementary. She pointed out landmarks along the way, the corner store where she sometimes bought candy with her allowance, the park where her father took her on weekends, the library where they went every Tuesday evening. "Are you nervous?" she asked as they approached the school building. "A little," admitted. "Are you?" "A little too, but good nervous, like when something exciting is about to happen." Riverside Elementary was a modest brick building surrounded by a chain-link fence and small playground. Children's artwork decorated the windows, and hand-painted signs welcomed visitors to the Mother's Day celebration. Could see other families arriving mothers in their best outfits, some fathers who'd taken time off work, grandmothers carrying covered dishes for the potluck. Emma slipped her small hand into as they approached the front entrance. The gesture was so natural and trusting that it nearly stopped him in his tracks. When was the last time someone had reached for his hand simply because they wanted the comfort of connection? "Thank you for coming," Emma whispered as they walked through the doors. "This is the best surprise ever." The school hallways buzzed with activity. Colorful artwork lined the walls, and the air smelled like cafeteria food and construction paper. Emma led confidently toward her classroom, greeting teachers and classmates along the way. Several adults did double takes at the sight of the impeccably dressed businessman holding hands with little Emma Martinez, but their expressions showed curiosity rather than judgment. "Mrs., Emma called out as they reached her classroom door. "This is my special friend I told you about." Mrs. was a woman in her 40s with laugh lines around her eyes and the patient demeanor of someone who genuinely loved working with children. She shook his hand warmly. Emma hasn't stopped talking about you all week, she said with a smile. She's told the whole class about her special friend who is coming to the celebration. You've made one little girl very happy. She's made me happy too, replied, surprised by how easily the truth came out. The classroom had been transformed for the occasion. Round tables were set up for the potluck lunch, decorated with paper flowers and hand-drawn the children had made. A corner of the room was designated for craft activities, with supplies laid out for making Mother's Day cards and picture frames. Emma proudly introduced to her classmates and their mothers. The children were curious but accepting, more interested in showing off their own special guests than questioning why Emma's looked different from the others. "This is my friend," Emma would say with obvious pride. "He's very important, but he came to my school's celebration because he cares about me." Found himself genuinely enjoying the conversations with other parents. These were working families, people who understood struggle and appreciated simple joys. They welcomed him warmly once they saw how much Emma meant to him and how much he clearly cared about her. During lunch, sat between Emma and a mother named Jennifer, whose daughter was Emma's closest friend at school. Jennifer had brought homemade enchiladas that reminded of his own childhood, the kind of food made with love rather than expensive ingredients. "Emma talks about you a lot," Jennifer told as they watched the girls giggle over their juice boxes. "Comes home with stories about Emma's special friend who takes her for coffee and helps with homework." "Coffee?" laughed, glancing at Emma. "Hot chocolate," Emma corrected with a grin, "but it sounds more grown-up to say coffee." As lunch wound down, Mrs. announced it was time for the craft activities. Each parent-child pair would work together to create a special keepsake. Felt a flutter of nervousness. His business skills didn't exactly translate to elementary school art projects. "Don't worry," Emma whispered, seeming to sense his apprehension. "I'm really good at crafts, I'll help you." They were given supplies to make decorated picture frames. Emma immediately took charge, carefully selecting construction paper in shades of purple and yellow. Her small fingers moved with surprising skill as she cut out flower shapes and arranged them around the frame. "What picture should we put in it?" asked. Emma considered this seriously. "Maybe we could take one today, of us together at my school." Mrs. overheard and offered to take their photo with his phone. Emma posed proudly beside him, her arm around his waist, her smile radiant with joy. In the photo, looked more genuinely happy than he had in any professional headshot or business magazine feature. As they worked on their craft project, found himself completely absorbed in the simple pleasure of creating something with his hands alongside this remarkable little girl. Emma chattered about her favorite subjects, reading and science, her dreams for the future, maybe becoming a teacher like her mother had been, and her thoughts on important topics like why chocolate chip cookies were better than oatmeal cookies. "You know what I like about you?" Emma said as she carefully glued a paper flower to their frame. "What's that?" "You listen to me like what I say matters. Some grown-ups just pretend to listen while they think about other things, but you really pay attention." Realized she was absolutely right. In the past week, he'd been more present and focused during their conversations than he was in most of his business meetings. Emma's genuine curiosity about the world and her thoughtful observations were far more engaging than quarterly profit reports. Other families began finishing their projects and preparing to leave. Felt a pang of sadness that the celebration was coming to an end. This simple morning at an elementary school had been more meaningful than most of his social events at exclusive clubs and expensive restaurants. "Time for one more surprise," Emma announced, pulling out a carefully folded piece of paper from her pocket. "I wrote something for you." Unfolded the paper to find a handwritten letter in Emma's careful 7-year-old script. "Dear, thank you for being my special friend. You make me feel like I matter. Mama used to say that the best presents aren't things you buy, but time you spend with people you care about. Today you gave me the best present ever. You showed up for me when I needed someone, and that makes you very special. I hope we can be friends for a long time. Maybe someday I can do something special for you too. Love, Emma. P.S. Miss Sarah says you seem happier since we became friends. I'm happy too." Read the letter twice, his vision blurring slightly. This little girl had somehow captured exactly what he'd been feeling, that their friendship was changing him in ways he was only beginning to understand. "Emma, this is the most beautiful letter I've ever received," he said softly. Thank you. As they gathered their belongings and prepared to leave the classroom, several other parents approached. Word had spread about the businessman who'd taken time off work to attend a school celebration with a little girl who wasn't even his daughter. What you're doing is really special, said David's Maria, whose daughter was in Emma's class. Emma's dad talks about you all the time. You've given that family something money can't buy: hope. Walking back to the after the celebration, Emma was practically glowing with happiness. She carried their decorated picture frame carefully, already planning where she would display it in her bedroom. That was the best day ever, she declared as they reached Sarah's corner. All the kids loved you. Mom said you're really nice, and Mrs. said she hopes you'll come to more school events. Sarah was waiting for them with hot chocolate and fresh cookies, eager to hear about every detail of the celebration. As Emma recounted the morning's events with animated gestures and infectious enthusiasm, felt a sense of completion he'd never experienced before. This wasn't just about attending one school event. This was about discovering what it meant to truly matter to another person, not because of what he could buy or achieve, but because of who he chose to be. After Emma left with her father that evening, remained at the processing everything that had happened. Sarah joined him with 2 cups of coffee, sensing he needed to talk. You know, Sarah said thoughtfully, when Emma first asked you to be her special friend, I wondered if you really understood what you were signing up for. I'm not sure I did, admitted. I thought I was doing a favor for a lonely little girl, but I think she's the one who did the favor for me. How so? Considered the question carefully. I've spent years building a successful business, accumulating wealth, achieving everything society says should make me happy. But until I met Emma, I didn't understand the difference between being successful and being significant. He paused, watching the evening light fade over the city he'd conquered professionally, but never truly connected with personally. Emma needed someone to show up for her, he continued. But I needed someone to show up for even more. I needed to remember what it feels like to be genuinely needed, to make a difference in someone's life that has nothing to do with money or power. Sarah nodded knowingly. Children have a way of teaching us what really matters, don't they? She does, and I don't want this to be a one-time thing. I want to be part of Emma's life if David will let me. I want to attend more school events, help with homework, maybe take her to museums or parks. I want to be the kind of consistent presence she deserves. What about your business, your busy schedule? Smiled, I'm learning that there are things more important than profit margins. Emma taught me that in 1 week what 15 years of therapy never could. The next Monday, made a decision that shocked his entire company. He restructured his role, stepping back from day-to-day operations to focus on strategic leadership. This gave him the flexibility to maintain regular involvement in Emma's life while still fulfilling his business responsibilities. He established a scholarship fund at Riverside Elementary, ensuring that children like Emma would have access to educational resources and support. But more importantly, he showed up consistently attending school concerts, helping with homework, teaching Emma about business and encouraging her dreams. David gradually warmed to the arrangement, recognizing that friendship was a genuine gift rather than charity. The 3 of them became an unconventional but loving family unit, with filling a role somewhere between mentor, uncle, and friend. 6 months later, Emma stood on stage at her school's winter concert, singing with her classmates while David beamed proudly from the audience. As she spotted them in the crowd and waved enthusiastically, thought about how one simple question from a brave little girl had completely transformed his understanding of success. Emma had asked him to be her mother for one day, but she'd actually taught him how to be human again. She'd shown him that the most valuable things in life couldn't be bought or sold. They could only be shared, one genuine moment at a time. After the concert, as they walked back to Sarah's corner for their weekly celebration dinner, Emma slipped her hand into, just as she had on that first Mother's Day celebration. Thank you, she said quietly. For what this time? Asked. For staying. Mama always said the best friends are the ones who stick around even when things get ordinary. You didn't just come to one special day, you stayed for all the regular days too. Squeezed her small hand gently. I wouldn't miss them for the world. As they entered the warm, familiar where their friendship had begun, realized that Emma's original question, can you be mine for one day? had become something much more profound. She'd become his for always, and he'd become the kind of person who understood that true wealth was measured not in dollars, but in the depth of the connections we choose to nurture. In saving Emma from feeling alone at a school celebration, she had saved him from a life of successful isolation. It was, often reflected, the best business deal he'd ever made, even though it had cost him nothing but his time and heart, and returned everything he'd never known he was missing. Important title he'd ever held. The special friend who was coming to her school celebration knew that this was just the beginning of something extraordinary. He had no idea how profoundly this moment would change both their lives, but for the first time in years, he was genuinely excited to find out.